we're going to cover the houses and the themes of each house for each of you according to your sidereal rising sign. I'm just going to jump right in with Aries. If you have Aries rising, this is, of course, is a 5th house new moon for you. So it has to do with creativity, has to do with children, has to do with love and romance, has to do with risk-taking, has to do with things that we do for pleasure, things that we do for fun, right? And then the 5th house also rules sports. It rules gambling, things like that as well. If you have Taurus rising, this will be a 4th house new moon for you. So that's home and family, that's property, it's your parents. It can be one parent specifically, or it can be both of your parents. That's 4th house stuff. If you have Gemini rising, this will be a 3rd house new moon for you. So 3rd house has to do with travel and communication that happens nearby, happens local to you. So short distance travel, I would say anything less than 500 miles you could count as short distance. 3rd house also has to do with education and the mind, has to do with communication like we talked about, has to do with your siblings, your neighbors, and your extended family like aunts, uncles, cousins. Those are ruled by the 3rd house. And then the 3rd house also rules your immediate environment. Okay. If you have Cancer rising, this will be a 2nd house new moon for you. So that's earned income and expenses. That's wealth. It's possessions, but it's movable possessions, right? It's not like real estate is not a movable asset. It doesn't count as 2nd house wealth. This is money that you earn from the work that you do. This can be family business type things. The 2nd house also has to do with expenses. So if you have to make an outlay of money for an expense or make a purchase, if you're buying or selling your own personal possessions, that's all 2nd house activities. 2nd house can also have to do, and we don't necessarily talk about this every time, although we really should. 2nd house can also have to do with issues around self-worth. It can have to do with your own values and how they change and evolve over time. So even if you're not specifically dealing with actual money or financial issues during a 2nd house new or full moon, you may be dealing with themes around your personal values and priorities. You may be dealing with themes around self-worth. Okay. If you have Leo rising, this will be, of course, a 1st house new moon, right? Your birthday new moon, which is kind of fun. That means you get to use it any way you want to. It's kind of a wild card in that sense. But the 1st house specifically has to do with our personality, right? It has to do with identity. It can have to do with self-expression. It has to do with our physical body and our appearance. It also has to do with the role that you play in the world, but also how you show up in the world. It has to do with your behavior and your mannerisms and how you interact with your environment. Just your way of being is part of your 1st house and how the 1st house can describe you. Okay, if you have Virgo rising, this will be a 12th house new moon. And of course, 12th house has to do with privacy and seclusion. It has to do with things that happen behind our ability to easily perceive them, right? So 12th house has to do with spirituality, has to do with your unconscious mind and the beliefs that you harbor, has to do with escapist tendencies, has to do with things like addiction, but it also can govern activities that you do on your own, solo projects, anything where you might seclude yourself away to engage in an activity or a task, even if it's something that you eventually share with the world. If it's something that you're doing in private, if it's something that you're doing on your own without other people observing or participating, it's really a 12th house activity. If you have Libra rising, this will be 11th house new moons. And of course, 11th house has to do with friends, organizations, your social life, groups that you belong to. And it also has to do with your deepest held hopes and dreams. So a new moon in the 11th house is really a fantastic time to take a step towards manifesting a hope or dream that you have, especially one that's near and dear to your heart. So definitely take advantage of that if you've got Libra rising. If you've got Scorpio rising, of course, it'll be 10th house. That has to do with career and achievement. It has to do with your professional life. It has to do with awards and recognition and status and reputation. For Sagittarius, this will be a 9th house new moon. And of course, the 9th house has to do with international affairs. It has to do with long distance travel and long distance communication as the counterpart to the 3rd house, right? Has to do with immigration, publishing and broadcasting are some examples of long distance communication. So things like podcasting or like YouTube channels, live streaming, anything like that would fall under 9th house. 9th house also has to do with legal matters and higher education as well. And so if you have Sagittarius rising, you may find that those are some of the themes that are active for you with this new moon. If you have Capricorn rising, it'll be an 8th house new moon, and that has to do with other people's money. It has to do with resources that come to you through the people that you know in your life, through your partner. This can have to do with loans, money that you borrow, money that's left to you by someone in a will or in a estate. 8th house money also relates to investment earnings. Insurance and taxes are 8th house, and that can be taxes that you owe and premiums that you pay, or it can be claims that are paid out to you or tax refunds that are due you. That could be money going either direction when it comes to insurance and taxes. And then 8th house also has to do with bonus or commission income. So if you earn any kind of income through bonuses or commissions, that can be an 8th house type of income for you. And then 8th house also has to do with themes like death and rebirth and transformation and metamorphosis, right? So some more kind of occult themes rather than just resources and money, okay? If you have Aquarius rising, this will be a 7th house new moon for you. So it has to do with, of course, partnership and marriage. That can have to do with business activities and business partnerships as well. Your relationships with other people in general, including open enemies. That's also a 7th house matter. And then the 7th house can also describe what we reject about ourselves or what we tend to project onto other people if you're looking at doing some shadow work with the new moon. And then finally, for Pisces rising, this of course is a 6th house new moon for you. So that has to do with work, has to do with health, it has to do with your daily routines and schedules, your habits. 6th house also relates to employees and pets. And it also, the 6th house rules diet. So this is where the food that you eat comes into play as well. And so if anyone is joining us late, let me know in the comments what your sidereal rising sign is, and I can recap for you what house and what the themes of that house are for you if you'd like to work with your natal houses tonight as we do the intention setting. Otherwise, what we'll do is we will move on to part 3 of the broadcast, where we'll explore in more depth Leo and the Leo archetype and the themes that can be coming up for us with this particular new moon.